Hello YouTube, it's Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to the 5th season of Sexism in Movies and TV. Now, there are many reasons as to why I do this review show. One of which is the portrayal of men in the media is downright horrific. It's an insult. It's why most kids think their dads are idiots. But when it comes to women, they get the get out of horrible portrayal free card. And although I do review a lot of shows and movies that are aimed at a mature adult audience, most of what I review is aimed at a young audience. And yes, I kind of do blame shows like Adventure Time and Loud House and the bulk of what usually appears on this show as being the reason that teenage boys have such low self-esteem. Which is actually kind of true when you think about it from a psychological perspective. When every single portrayal, well, almost every single portrayal of men and boys on TV and in movies is negative, of course these teenage boys, when they first hit puberty, are going to have horrible self-esteem. So, in that regard, I know that I have a noble cause when I rip apart these televised pieces of shit. So anyways, on with the review.
Once I bite you, you will become my slave.
No thanks, I already have a wife. I hereby sentence you to marriage without parole. Did you laugh at any of those jokes? Well, if you did, shame on you. You see, for some stupid reason, and I will agree that most of the trying to make marriage seem like a death sentence is not exactly a good idea. I really like the movie Get Out. I think it's a very good movie that plays with a lot of powerful themes, and I do agree. Also, through YouTube, I heard that, you see, This movie I really wanted to see until I found out about the feminist themes in the book that it was based off of. And now, in modern day, with the success of Jordan Peele's Get Out and the men's rights movement, I can't believe that Hollywood hasn't decided to do a men's rights version of the movie Get Out, or a men's rights version of the Stepford Wives. The movie would work like this. A man would be out on a date, he'd have too much to drink, and then he'd wake up handcuffed in his date's cellar. She'd keep him prisoner and starve him while she constantly eats and gets fatter and fatter. Then this guy, who's become skinny enough to slip through the handcuff, makes it out, stabs the fat bitch in her sleep, and walks out, making his way to freedom. The insult actually is that there is a movie that fits that description, only it's a gender-swapped version of what I described. The movie starts up with a bunch of hooks and blades as a woman is running out of a cellar. She encounters the villain and tries to fight him off. She's able to make it out of the house, but eventually he does kill her. He then kisses the dead body of the woman he just murdered, seals it in plastic, and then we get the title screen. Okay, in order to explain how bad that this shit movie is, I'm going to give it an abridged review, like I've done with so many in the past. And to make sure you all know that this isn't comedy, and I did not bother to learn the characters' names, it was that bad. So I'm going to be referring to this guy, the antagonist, as Creep, and this whore as Final Girl. And just for the record, this is not comedy. This is not meant to be taken in a comedic way at all. So anyways, let's start the review. Okay, so Final Girl and her best friend go home after a night of drinking. This is actually important and something that I will bring up later. So anyways, the creep breaks into her house, kidnaps Final Girl, and locks her up in a cage made of wood. And this is the conflict of the movie, her trying to get out. This is a goddamn metaphor for marriage. This is fucking insulting. I'm just going to say it. The metaphor is essentially saying that all heterosexual men are like this creep, and that every heterosexual woman who's married is essentially locked up in bondage. That isn't funny. You know, if the creep had been a vampire, a werewolf, a zombie, a cannibal, or any other horror movie cliche, this film might actually have a chance at being tolerable. But it's not. It's a worthless shitfest. So anyways, Final Girl's best friend shows up to try and rescue her, and the creep, who, might I add, only wanted a wife, and this is all metaphorical, ends up killing her, making an already insulting metaphor even more insulting. Because I guess the best friend in this case is a metaphor for a homewrecker. The goddamn retards who made this shit movie are implying that all heterosexual men who are married cheat on their wives. So anyways, Final Girl tricks the creep into letting her out of the cage by agreeing to put on the wedding dress, stabs him, and locks him in the cage. And this piece of shit movie then ends with Final Girl walking away like a badass. I'm just gonna say it. This movie is fucking insulting. Especially when movies like Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 have been made. And believe me, I will put a link to that review in the goddamn description. In more ways than one. If you ever saw the movie Scream, you would know what I mean when I say this movie is breaking the goddamn rules. It's like Randy said in Scream, when he spelled out the rules to surviving a horror movie. Both sexuality and alcohol lead to death. And in this case, Final Girl and her best friend are not only drunkards, but they're sluts as well. So in all fairness, the creep should have been the one to come out on top at the end of this movie. But instead, for some reason, the goddamn retards who made it let the Final Girl win, which is an insulting trope in itself. I can already hear the idiots in the comments section saying, "Oh, just because it's a horror movie doesn't mean it's a slasher movie." And to that I say bull and fuck. The only weapons used in this piece of shit were knives, and it came out during the 21st century. Of course it's a slasher movie, you morons! And not only is it a slasher movie, it's a slasher movie that's breaking the rules established by the original slasher movie, Halloween. Believe me when I say this movie gets more and more insulting as it goes on. At one point, the creep actually gets harassed by Jehovah's Witnesses. Not to mention the fact that this movie could have gone that route and could have been about the dangers of going to a bar or a nightclub and coming home drunk. Because you never know what could happen. And now it's time for me to answer the question of the hour. If this piece of shit movie was so bad, why the fuck did I buy it? Well, the answer is that I actually didn't. It came randomly. I got it randomly at Walmart in a 2-disc set of horror movies. I didn't know what I was going to get. I wanted to be surprised, but instead I was insulted. Despite being the most insulting movie on this DVD, there are actually 2 movies that are almost as bad. First, you got Coven, which sees a man and his wife moving onto this island or something, 'cause the man, of course it's always the man in these movies, wants a simpler life and ends up getting brainwashed by a witch into throwing out everything he loves, which includes his baseball cards, and then gets killed off. And on the other hand, you have Midnight's Child, a movie about a family with a working mom and a stay-at-home dad who hire a nanny, but she turns out to be a witch, and the nanny is basically just trying to put their daughter through a marriage pact with Satan, and the mother has a dream or a nightmare that the nanny has replaced her. In all fairness, something like Midnight's Child is in the same vein as Cellar Door, where it would actually be scarier and might actually have a decent message if the antagonist won. I really wasn't insulted by this movie, as the insult is not aimed at me, but Midnight's Child is a movie that really is nothing more than an attack on traditional motherhood. 2 years ago, I did a top 10 list of movies that should get a gender swap remake. Now, if I had seen any of these 3 movies prior to making this list back in episode 25, these 3 would be at the top, along with a gender-swapped remake of The Shining that strictly follows the Stanley Kubrick adaptation from the 80s. Now, do you remember all those sexist jokes that appeared right before the review started? Did you laugh at any of them? Well, if you did, shame on you. If you laughed at any of those jokes or found them funny, you are nothing more than a man-hating sack of shit. And that's it. It's done. The review is hereby over, and Echo Bridge can go fuck off.